Okay, you know, I am Mother Martha. I've been living here for about 3.5 years, a little bit more, and getting to know the place. And we are now in the abbatial church, whose dedication we celebrated 2 years ago, the 800th anniversary of the dedication of the church. We'll come back to this. It took a long time to build the church, but it is one of the, it is a real Cistercian architecture, and I'll tell you something about this, the history of the place now. Most of all, the most important thing in this area, this whole complex, is that it was here that St. Paul was decapitated and gave his life for Christ and for us, because without St. Paul, I think we wouldn't be Christians. And he was the one that spread the church and started churches that then became missionary churches and reached to Europe and America and Asia, and everything started with St. Paul. And that he gave his life here. I think he was a missionary, he was a martyr from the first day that Jesus met him on the road to Damascus. Because as we say to the people, the pilgrims, many pilgrims who come here every day, to be a martyr is not to lose your head, although maybe it's to lose your heart, no? And then to give your life and to be witness to the faith every day of your life, not just the last one. You don't have to die a martyr's death to be a martyr. So, the tradition is that this was the place that Paul was brought to for his execution. As we know, he was a Roman citizen, and so he couldn't be crucified with the other Christians. He was brought down here, which was outside of the city of Rome, and a kind of a marketplace where the caravans would come from all over the Roman world to meet the merchants of Rome and do wholesaling. It was not a very quiet or beautiful place, kind of rough and nasty. And he was brought here, and perhaps 1 or 2 days before his execution, he was held in a little prison that we can remember in the first little church that you saw on the other side there. We'll go there later. And then walked down this path that leads towards the church that is the memory of his martyrdom. Even that path is special because they have preserved a part of it that has the stones from 2,000 years ago, so that you can also see or walk on the stones that Paul walked on as he went to his death. The first church was probably in about the 6th century, but the Christians kept a good memory of where Paul had died. There's no written testimony before the 6th century, but it's very clear that the memory was very alive and well kept, as exactly to the place where he had been killed. And then in the 6th century and more in the 7th century, some Greek monks came to start a monastery at the place where Paul had been martyred. There was more freedom in the church then. And they were from the area of Tarsus, from Cilicia. So they came as co-nationals with Paul to start a little monastery here. And this monastery is built on the place of that first monastery. There were ups and downs in this history, as it's a long one, but there were always monks praying here and people coming as pilgrims, especially to see the Tre Fontane, because as the tradition tells us, when Paul's head was cut off, it was so full of life that it bounced 3 times as it went down a hill, And the tradition is that where his head landed, 3 fountains came up. Now, being here, you might say that's just a fairy tale, or just an image, or just a symbol for the living waters that sprang up from the martyrdom of Paul, from his life and his death and his life with us now. But we have seen here, being here, that it's a very watery place. In fact, the name of the place before, in the Roman times, was Aquae Salviae, saving waters. And the water level is very close to the surface. So if we want to plant some flowers in our garden, you just go down a little bit and you find it's very damp and watery, So the possibility is there. That also, I think that you will see a painting of the executioner cutting off the head, who cut the head off. And he seems to be someone with a lot of energy and power. And he probably hit Paul so hard that his head rolled down a few meters. So that is celebrated in the church, where there are 3 small niches where the 3 fountains were or are. But they were cut off at the time that this church that we will see was rebuilt in 1600 for a Jubilee year, to celebrate a Jubilee year. They took down the old little chapel and put up this new one, and it seemed that they disturbed the waters. But people were still taking holy water from these fountains up until about 75 years ago, taking the water home and using it. But now it's closed off. There's no water available there. The monastic presence, I think from the 7th century on, was continuous, but with wars and invasions and changes of empires and all that, it was not constant, the same group of people, the same. Then in the 12th century, when our order, the Cistercians, was founded, the story is that Pope Innocent II was having problems with Anacletus, who wanted to become the Pope. There were 2 popes, and so he ran off to France, and there he met St. Bernard, and St. Bernard decided to help him, that he was the real Pope, and he came back to Rome with him, and he settled everything out. And in fact, Pope Innocent II went ahead, and so he wanted to have Bernard's monks here in Rome, hoping that then St. Bernard would come and stay here too, because he needed friends. He was still in an embattled situation. Well, so he asked for monks from St. Bernard, and St. Bernard didn't want to give them because it was too close to Rome, and he didn't want his monks to be in the city. So he was sending monks to another monastery of the Cistercians here in Italy, and the Pope kidnapped them and brought them here. Well, finally, St. Bernard gave in, and so he came and established the foundation, and the first abbot of this monastery then became, he was elected as one of the next popes. Again, I think to have a strong arm of help from the Cistercians, from St. Bernard. That's Blessed Eugene III. And to him, he asked for advice from St. Bernard, his father, and Bernard wrote a little book called De Consideratione, which is read by all the popes ever since, because it's about how to be a pope. And it's also available for us to find out how to be a good Christian. That's the story of the Cistercians here, starting up. Now, another fact of St. Bernard's presence here is that in the little church, Scala Coeli, that is on the left over there, St. Bernard was saying Mass there with the Pope, and he had a vision of the souls going up to heaven because of the prayers of the faithful. And so that the name of the church is Scala Coeli, the ladder to heaven. And so that St. Bernard is very present here. Now, when we came, 5 of us sisters, to help out the monks who were kind of declining rather rapidly, I felt, wow, the place where St. Paul was martyred and where St. Bernard brought his monks and founded a community must be a place of grace and of energy, incredible spiritual energy. If you have St. Paul and Bernard together, what can't you do? But sometimes I think they got a little separated because the monks are very cloistered. And there are thousands of people who come to visit St. Paul. And they didn't want to have their monastic life disturbed by that, so they're very much inside the monastery, and there's not too much connection between the sacred place of the martyrdom and the prayer of the monks. We want to do a little bit more about having welcoming groups like yourselves, and having the monks more in contact with the people, because that's important. And for the monks nowadays to have the welcoming, the hospitality. Okay? What else can I tell you? Well, the Cistercians weren't here from the 12th century until now. There were, again, ups and downs. At a certain point, this was owned or used or serviced by the Benedictine monks of St. Paul outside the walls. At another point, the Franciscans were asked to take care of it. It was a kind of a messy place for a while. It was also full of malaria. And even when the Cistercians were there, and then when they came back in the 19th century. It started, and then from the 19th century up until today. But there was so much malaria that the monks were all dying, and they didn't really know what caused malaria at that time. And they brought hundreds of eucalyptus trees from Australia, I think, thinking that our eucalyptus trees are going to take care of the malaria. Well, it didn't. No. Then they got a place up in the hills where they could go in the summertime when there was more malaria. Then they discovered, the rest of the world discovered, that it was caused by mosquitoes. And what helped them to get rid of the malaria was putting screens on the windows. So now there's no more malaria, but it is, because we're in a valley and there's much water underneath the ground, so it's very humid. And so it's very cold in the winter and very hot in the summer, having both extremes, good ascetic life that is built into the place. No? So, any questions? Then we can start to see something. I got special permission. The cardinal, the vicar of the Pope, Cardinal de Donatis, who has now been replaced, but he helped us to put new lighting in the church that now you can see and enjoy. Before it was very dark and you couldn't see much about what was inside the church. Now we are enjoying this. These are different kinds of putting the lights on. This is the full lighting for a solemnity or something like that, and gives a good view of this church. Here, when the Greek monks were here in the 7th century, the Pope gave to them, what century it was, I don't know, I'm not too clear on that, but gave them the relics of Saint Anastasius, who was a Persian monk martyr. And so his relics are here in this chapel. Then in about the 13th century, the relics of Saint Vincenzo of Saragossa, who was a deacon martyr and who was very popular in Italy. They have many, many, many churches to him. His relics were also given to the monks too. So we have their relics here in this chapel. We also have, in these two windows, seem to be windows, but they're in those, behind the grills there, are hundreds of relics of St. Bernard, of St. Roberto, and of many, many other saints. We have to put them in order because the monks had kind of forgotten they were there. But we want to make them more available to be venerated. Another saint who is buried, whose relics are here, is Saint Zeno. Now, I don't know if I had never heard of him before, but he was in the Legion, the Roman Legion, commander in the Roman Legion, and he was Christian. And many of his legion were Christian. And so they were brought to Rome to build the baths of Diocletian, hoping that they would all die in the process. And so they were all brought here and martyred. Zeno and more than 10,000 soldiers. So they were buried someplace around here, but all of the Christians who were Roman citizens, many of them were killed here, not just St. Paul. So that wherever we walk in this area, we're walking on the relics of martyrs. So that wherever we're walking, we have relics that we venerate, and then we have relics that our feet are walking on. No? It's a very sacred place, no? With the prayer of monks in all these centuries in the place already made holy by St. Paul. Now, I got permission from Father Emmanuel, who was here a minute ago, to let you see the cloister, which is again from the 12th century, still standing. The whole monastery is still standing as it was in the 11th, with some reparations. But we're not going to go all the way around the Cloister. How do you say that? Cloister. I forget my English. We'll just kind of take a look, because it's the same, and going all around. Most people don't get a chance to go inside. That's not for the guests. But we'll go in now together out this door, and then we'll come back here to go out and go to the other churches. This is the place where the monks gathered to read the rule and to have sermons from the abbot. It usually would not be a chapel, no, it would just be a place for listening to the rule and comment on the rule and instruction, monastic teaching. The monastery is a bit older than the church. I forgot to tell you that when the kidnapped monks came, the Pope had already built the monastery and the church. He was so eager to have the monks come. But he didn't do it in the Cistercian style. And Cistercian architecture is very much a part of the charism. So this part of the monastery was more or less like a monastery should be, but the church wasn't. So the hard-headed Cistercian monks tore it down and built it up again. So the church is newer than the rest of the monastery, which is probably about 900 years, and that the dedication was 800 years ago. So, great. This is Saint Beato Eugene. This is a bell. This is. You'll hear it later on. Yeah. This is the first abbot who became the Pope. You see the statues of St. Paul and St. Peter. Wherever there is St. Paul, there is St. Peter, because they are the two columns of the church in Rome. And so even in this church, there's an altar to St. Peter, but the main altar is one to St. Paul. And here we have a painting of his martyrdom, which is it's lost its color because there was a lightning struck and there was a chemical reaction. But you see that you can kind of see that where the head has come far away from the body and has caused these three fountains. There's also the tradition that besides blood, milk came out of his throat, his head. A sign, again, of he was always giving birth to the churches. No? It was the maternity, the giving. Now, in the back, in the center, with the orange shawl, is St. Luke. And behind him, St. Luciana. Now, St. Luciana was one of his disciples, and she was the one who had a piece of property nearby here where they could take Paul to be buried. Up above the door that we just came in, there is the funeral procession, which is taking the body of St. Paul to the place where you were yesterday, right? At St. Paul's outside the walls. And that's where he was buried, because this was not a place to bury people. As I said, it was a marketplace. It was a very nasty kind of place. So she had a piece of property nearby, which is only 3 kilometers walking from here. And that shows that he was taken there. Then other disciples are there. And so many people were witnesses of where he was killed. And so they remembered this would be the place. And these niches are signs of the 3 fountains. And as I said, it used to be the fountains came out, but not in the last 75 years they've been turned off for different reasons. But there is the source of water from these fountains is still there, but it doesn't get channeled into these places anymore. Then we have the altar of St. Peter. That is by a follower of Caravaggio, not Caravaggio. And I read that Caravaggio was very annoyed at this person who copied his style and used his style while he was still alive. The original is now in the Vatican Museum, and this is a copy made of it. This mosaic is about the 1st century as a pagan mosaic of the 4 seasons and the 4 gods of the seasons, which was in a pagan palace in Ostia. And when this church was renovated in the 19th century, some cardinal brought this mosaic from the ancient pagan palace to put here in the church. It's the oldest thing that is here. It's about 2,000 years old.